Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zach Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Lynn Whitbeck. Lynn is known as the Queen of Joyful Sales. Business owners and entrepreneurs hire Lynn to ignite winning sales because most fail to connect, capture, and close their ideal clients. So Lynn helps sell with intent for maximum impact, influence, and income. The bottom line, sales, love it or hate it, you won't survive without it. So let's dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth. So welcome, Lynn. I'm super excited to have you here with us today.
Zach, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Well, as my audience and listeners know, I always like to lead in with a little bit of your story history. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience, where did you get started in business? How did it and lead you to where you are today? What were some of the critical milestones, maybe the challenges, the successes, maybe the tear-filled moments, for better or for worse, that brought you here with us? I would love to hear a little bit more about your backstory as we dive in.
Well, I'd love to get started with that. And it really starts when I was a young girl selling Girl Scout cookies. And we had a brand new badge that came out, and you had to you had to sell literally a truckload of cookies to get this badge. And here I am, 11 years old, and I wanted that badge. I wanted it bad. And so I came up with hauling my friend Judy with my little red wagon filled with cookies. And out I went that very first day, hitting the pavement. And I discovered three challenges right off. First, hauling that little red wagon along the sidewalk was not that easy when it's loaded with cookies. The second is that not everybody was home or not everybody was purchased. And third, my friend Judy, bless her heart, was so shy and introverted. She would not leave the wagon at the sidewalk. So I would go to the door, and if they purchased cookies, I'd have to run back to the wagon to get the cookies. And then by the time I got back to the door, they'd go, "Oh, wait, I want another box of samosas." And I'd be running back to the wagon. So here I was at the end of the day, and I'm with my parents having dinner, and I was really despondent. I'm going like, how am I going to sell a truckload of cookies to get this badge? And I told my tale of woe to my parents, and my dad asked me a single question. And he said, "Lynn, where do people normally buy their cookies?" And I went to the grocery store. So a plan was born, and the next day, there we were. Judy and I had a table set up. She played to her strengths. She sat in the back. She took the money. She handed over the cookies. And there I was out front, pulling people into the table. I had an unlimited supply of clients. And at the end of cookie season, we were the only two girls in our district to win that coveted cookie badge, and the youngest two girls in the state to win it that year. And we did it because we thought like our clients, and we had a plan, and we executed on that plan consistently every day. And so, Girl Scouts was such a great organization, and I loved it, and I love the cookies. So when you love what you do and you love your product or service, it's really easy to find sales joyful. And as an adult, I got to add on the next layer, which was seeing the impact that I created. And when I would help and serve my clients, I could see the results. And that always just filled me with joy. It made me so happy. And it wasn't rocket science, but if I could take one thing off their plate and make it go away, it made their life a little better, made their work a little better. And
Mm.
that was a gift.
That's beautiful. It's so funny. I remember, well, just yesterday I was leaving the grocery store. And of course, there's literally the kids sitting outside with the Girl Scout cookies. But the one thing that was different is years ago. I mean, I guess my daughter is 16 now, so she was probably 7 or 8. I built a little lemonade stand that we put outside of Grandma and Grandpa's house. And I'll never forget. I mean, she was so adorable because she's standing on the curb. She's like, "Get your lemonade, get your lemonade." She was just so excited. And I think, the majority of people stopped not because they wanted lemonade, but just because of the enthusiasm of this little girl. And these girls yesterday that were selling the Girl Scout cookies, it was like they're sitting there, heads down on their phones, the table's set up, and I'm like, I'm tempted. But the salesman in me, I'm like, nah, I'm not making this investment. If you're not really here for the joy of what you're doing and with some real outcome that you're trying to create, then I wasn't willing to stop and put my money on the table at that moment. So what I'm curious about is what did that lead to next in your speaking career? So that seemed like an inception point where you started to fall in love with the joy of sales and you learned a really important lesson too, which was the power of knowing where your ideal audience hangs out. And I've coached thousands of clients myself having that same conversation because we get so, and I know I'm sure you've seen this, right? How many clients have you worked with where I can serve everybody?
Yeah. No, I absolutely. I mean, that's why I talk about being a joyful sales.
Yeah.
For some people, that's going to completely turn them off. That's
Hmm.
okay.
Hmm.
I am naturally a happy person and I'm the glass half full kind of girl. So
Yeah.
when I lean into that authentic self,
Hmm.
and then I look at who do I want to help and serve, that is so important. And there's two sides to the equation, both yourself and your organization and who you are, and your ideal client. And what
Yeah.
happens is the magic is when those two come together.
Hmm.
And sometimes it can be hard for one or the other to make the connection because something's off, to your point.
Hmm.
And so once you make that connection, and part of it is truly leaning into who is your authentic self. And sure, with sales, of course you could help just about everybody. However, no, I don't. I mean, I lean into an authentic part of myself. I lean into a sales strategy of thinking about a reliable, consistent, scalable sales process.
Hmm.
And that's, once again, that's not for everybody. It's
Hmm.
not for the people who are always going to be chasing the shiny object.
Hmm.
You've got to be able to actually execute and stay on it.
Yep. It's funny too, because I mean, I've seen that, firsthand witnessed that happening at the highest levels. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
know.
just at the inception point of business, but I mean, you can be talking about nine-figure corporations where the CEOs have the best of intentions, but the team they've surrounded themselves with, thankfully, knows how to elegantly pull back on the reins and keep us focused on the thing that we need to, which is can be a bit exhausting in a perpetual battle. I want to know more about where you ended up next and more of the back history and journey that brought you to where you are today. But before we go to that, I'm going to be a little ADD in the moment, and I would love to hear a little bit about if you have or had a favorite client. And you don't have to name names or anything, but maybe it was the business, the industry, the experience, how they showed up, the transformation that you're able to create. I know that tying back to our previous conversation, I love people and I love serving. I love being able to contribute in a way that helps them to serve more people, make a greater impact, generate more revenue, and be rewarded for those things along the way. Is there anybody that comes to mind that really stands out that was a favorite client where you got to deliver one of those like, oh, this is if every client could be like this experience, I would love to be able to clone and duplicate them over and over.
No, I've had a lot of really great clients, and the really great ones I get to learn.
Hmm.
I get to learn about their industry. I get to learn about their organization. I had one client for a corporate when I was in my corporate career. That was amazing. I ended up really becoming invested. I became Six Sigma trained, and I learned so much about business, other aspects of business
Mhm.
from them. And then being working for a manufacturer, I've always loved that side of how everything fits together with operations and production, along with your marketing and your sales. Um, and I've worked with some really amazing organizations, and with just filled with really good people.
Mhm.
Um, and I've been really fortunate.
I love something you just said, and this is something that I think is really important for the audience to hear, whether they're potentially an owner that's looking for support with their sales team, or maybe the sales director or marketing for that. I mean, anybody in any organization can take away something from this. I found that oftentimes when people are looking to hire a sales expert, the first thought can tend to defer to somebody that knows the industry inside and out, that knows all the intricacies of their business. But you said something really profound. You said I had the opportunity to learn. And I think that's really valuable. Why I want to come back to that is because so often I think people can get myopic trying to find that expert in their particular niche. Whereas if instead you can find somebody that has a bit more of a global skill set, when they have that desire to grow and learn and find out more about the industry, they can bring in other unique insights and strategies and tools and action plans that somebody that has been so focused on that one thing for so long is in many cases really likely to overlook. Can you talk a little bit more about that experience and how being provided with the opportunity to learn about something that wasn't necessarily completely familiar to you, one maybe bolstered your energy a little bit and help create more excitement while you were bringing able to marry that with what you're really good at?
This happens to me all the time. So I've got a couple of examples that are really fresh. One is a dental practice at multiple locations,
Mm,
and I'd never worked with dentists before. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I've been to the dentist, but coming in, I had a very fresh look. And so I have a fresh client perspective, or in this case, patient perspective. And they brought me in, we started working together, and I'm happy to say that after 60 days, they had their best month ever,
mm,
across all of their locations.
mm,
And sometimes having a fresh perspective is something that you haven't looked at because you're just too close to it. You've
mm,
been in the trenches, you're fighting it out. And so this happened again just recently of working with a completely different type of business, which was a brick and mortar auto collision repair.
mm,
And the owner had a great operation. He also had a towing business. He had multiple different business entities, but he had really focused on what's going on in that industry with insurance companies steering to get the cheapest possible repair done to a vehicle. And he's iCar certified, I mean, in all the different makes and models. And what he cares about is that his customers have a safe car that's repaired properly and that the warranty's in place. But but he was so focused on this one area that he wasn't seeing what what really happens when people make a decision. I know you're a parent, I'm a parent. I would never put my child in a car, I don't care how old they are, if I didn't perceive that car to have been repaired safely. If
yeah.
an airbag deploys 1 second too soon or too fast or too late,
Mhm,
it's life or death. And I'm
mhm.
sorry, but big insurance companies, they're not Bob, your local agent. A big insurance company, there's just a dollar sign on your child's head. They don't give a damn. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
excuse me. They don't give a darn.
You're in good
So
company.
when you lean into what's really happening and the motions and the motivations of the people who are making the decision, because your deductible is the exact same, but your car is repaired properly, it is safer, absolutely, better parts, and it is your warranty with all the electronics in the cars are preserved so you have better financial return. That's a pretty easy choice. And especially when you have somebody who's experienced and it's going to be your advocate and help you with navigating the maze in the insurance world. So when you shift that discussion, and which we did, and within 30 days, all of a sudden he was saying so many, as he called, capturing the keys, because now they were leaning into what really mattered to people, because the cost of how much it is to repair what that only matters to the insurance company.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter to you or I. What we care about is getting back into that car and having it be look fantastic and being absolutely 110% safe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
looking at it from an outside perspective, and I didn't know about airbags and STS systems and all these. It's just, and but wow, it's just like now I can speak about that in a way that I never could have before.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, so what I really heard from you, and I hope everybody receives the same message, is the messaging, the language that you are using to connect with your ideal client. And what's beautiful about what you said too is this is synergistic. It works across context. This isn't just for sales, but I'm sure this also transformed a lot of the marketing language, the outbound language they were utilizing. Now, maybe they're getting a fairly consistent flow from those insurance claims, and that's great. But now he gets to transform what those conversations look like with the client coming in and really help them to identify what's going to be made the best decision for them. Um, what this leads me to next is what when you're starting with the business, like the automotive repair company, and you don't know a lot about the industry, what is from a client perspective, what do those initial conversations look like for you where you're both, you know, having to demonstrate your knowledge and ability to come in and make an impact while simultaneously learning more about what they do and their specific industries so you can create that convergence point where they say, heck yes, we need to work together. What do those initial conversations look like? How do you go about extracting that information while learning and implementing? I mean, because doing that in a 60-day timeline is pretty fast. I mean, that's a lot of new information to digest while helping to redefine that sales experience. So could you talk a little bit more about that? I'd love to know.
Well, I never go into any conversation without having done some research.
Hmm.
And depending on if it's an initial discovery call, that may only be 15 minutes to 30 minutes.
Hmm.
But once a client wants to move forward, we do a pretty deep dive. And so I look at any content that they've got out there. Do they have YouTube videos? Do they have podcast interviews? Do they have blog posts? What's available? And I digest it just like a consumer would. So I'm looking at it, I'm reading it, I'm learning things. And so in that very first meeting, also, we've already been given from the discovery process, really understanding the problem as perceived by the client and where they want to go, what's their dream, what's their goal or their initiative that they want to achieve. And my purpose is what's the fastest way to get there. And sometimes it's not, you don't have everything in place, but we were able to make changes to initiate that change quickly. And then you keep working on that because it's like building blocks. Sometimes there's an area that you're really hemorrhaging in.
Hmm.
And so with the dental practice, they weren't asking for patient referrals and or the reviews, and they weren't asking for 5-star reviews. You got to tell them exactly what you want. And it's how do you ask and when do you ask?
Hmm.
Right? There's very important. And I'm just going to give this as an example, but everybody's been in the networking meetings that you're just meeting people brand new, and somebody says they say, well, what do you need? And you say, oh, I need referrals. And I'm going like, I just met you. I'm not going to give you a referral. A referral means that it's my reputation that I'm staking on you that I'm going to refer you. Now, if you had asked me for an introduction, that's different, right? And so I want everyone to be really clear to clean up that language. But when you're looking at it from a business perspective with referrals, you've got to start seeding the idea of referrals from the very first time you meet someone. Like, Zach, it's so great that we've connected today. Normally I've already heard a lot about my client because they've been referred to me and we have a common ground. But this is fantastic because we've really connected and we've just met.
Hmm.
Well, I just seeded the idea that most of my business comes from referrals, but you can seed the idea of referrals all the way through the sales process, but you don't ask for it until you've earned the right.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's a really key piece. And then the same with a review. When do you ask for a review? Well, once again, you ask for a review when you've delighted someone and normally that they're already a client, but you also have to make it easy and painless for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, can I repeat back what you said? And do you have 1 minute to open up Google My Business? Here's the link, zap, and this is what you said, and leave a 5-star review.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that easy. Will you do
Mm-hmm.
me a favor? I mean,
Yep.
there's different language. And when you are able to put that in place for people and they practice it,
Mm-hmm.
so it just starts to become natural, that is going to lead to the exact results that you were looking for. More patient referrals and more 5-star reviews.
I love what you just said for a few different reasons. One, that was a really, really great pro tip. um, the art of seeding, of planting those little ideas in advance of the moment where you actually ask somebody to perform a particular action is a really powerful tool in behavioral psychology. We want to start embedding those ideas into somebody's unconscious mind so that that resistance lowers as we come up to the actual ask. And the second thing that you said that was really important is to make it as easy as possible. And I remember in my past life in the health and wellness industry, I took to actually mounting computers, little laptops in each of the studios and rooms. And I did it for a variety of reasons. I wanted to have all the information that was accessible for the trainers so they could serve the clients at the highest level, make sure they weren't having to go back and do redundant work, but also so they had these opportunities when somebody says something great, it's like, hey, that was amazing. Would you mind? Could we type this up really quick? And they can pull up Google right then and there, click send in 3 minutes before the person's out the door. And eliminating that resistance. Because the reality is what happens when people leave?
Yeah,
Life happens.
they get busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like they'll have the best of intentions, and people will be like, "Oh man, they didn't leave me the review like they said they would." And then they come in the next time, and they feel bad because they didn't, and you don't want to ask again. It's like we got to forget all of that stuff and remember that people are just people, and it's okay to ask more than once because life happens, and they're going to forget or get busy, or the school rings and they got to go pick up the kids, or whatever thing is happening. Maybe the car breaks down, right? But really, really valuable tips. I'm also curious about something else you just said because it struck a note with me. The automotive repair place. Um, Now, well, I should clarify first. You said he had multiple different services. I mean, there was the actual automotive repair. There was the tow truck. Were those all under one entity, or were they
Yeah.
independent businesses? Okay, so
No, they're all under one master business.
okay. What I'm really curious about is what this reminded me of is again past life in the fitness industry. I had specialty fitness retail stores that were both home and commercial licensed to completely different sales processes and strategies. We had our service division to completely different sales processes and strategies. And then I had boutique personal training studios, which while all of these things were very complementary, what can happen when they fall under one roof is it can dilute or confuse your messaging because
Yeah.
if I'm trying to promote, repair and service of equipment to a home versus a hotel or buying the equipment to the same thing, they're all completely different language. And going back to what you said in the beginning, we got to speak their language. How did you help them to effectively compartmentalize those conversations, and how did that affect their marketing? Tell me a little bit more about how you looked at that holistically and then help bring it together.
Yeah, so I mean the same can be true when you're looking at something like the other example I'd given was dentists. These are just two examples, people. So
Yeah, 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 right, yeah.
but because you have children, you have adults, right? You have people who are actually there because of they may have chronic headaches and other things that they're actual health issues that if your bite is off, you can literally be having migraines from that. And you
Hmm.
get your teeth straightened, you get that, and it's like suddenly you're migraine free. I mean, wow. So a miracle. So there's other health considerations. So that your point, there are different types of dialogues that you have. But the key thing is that it's always, what are the similarities, but what are the questions that you need to ask to identify? So
Hmm.
even within the aspect of the auto repair, in the sense of the collision repair, the car's been in an accident. People are going to they have different motivations around the vehicle.
Hmm.
So identifying that early and identifying what's the top priority
Mm-hmm.
for the individual's cars being repaired. Maybe it's a Mustang Mach-E, and it's this pristine brand new car. And it's like, oh my gosh, I want my car to be perfect again. And that motivation is different than somebody who's worried about putting their 6-month-old baby in the car in a car seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to look at what are those questions and then which way do you go? Because there's different paths that you can take. And then when you lead with that path, that helps you ask the right questions so that you can move the conversation forward to a yes. And then also always assuming that you're not necessarily going to get a yes right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Depending on the type of sales that you have to have a follow-up sale
Mm-hmm.
process because, I mean, in B2B, that's where 80% of your sales are made in follow-up. 80%. And what happens is that most people stop following up if they ever follow up at all. And to your point, it is, oh, people get busy and they ghost you. It's
Mm-hmm.
not because they didn't like you. It's not because they don't want your product or service. It's not because this wouldn't be a great help for them or their business. It's because life got in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you continue to follow up and deliver value in a timely manner that matters, guess what? You're going to stay top of mind. And one of these days, they're going to say, yep, I'm ready to move forward. And you're going to close the sale because you followed up.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I know I deviated a lot in what you were trying to say, but the
Mm-hmm.
key thing is you've got to, if you understand that ideal client and you really look into that, then what are the questions that you need to ask? And what are the branches that you need to go down?
Mm-hmm.
So that you can identify of the like if there's three priorities, what's the top, what's the second, and not just take their first answer. This is another big mistake, or maybe it's a power tip,
Mm-hmm.
but when someone gives you the answer and I'll say, Zach, wow, I'm really curious about that. Could you tell me more?
Mm-hmm.
Because the second answer that you give me is actually going to be closer. And I don't say that to the truth, but it's going to be closer to what's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because people will give you a surface answer, but you have to dig deep.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be, you can just go, huh, and stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
Use a powerful pause and let them fill the blank. I'm curious, tell me more. I'd like to hear about that. And just let them keep going because the more that you can pull out in sales, the more you can learn and understand. You're being a detective,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's Nancy Drew or Sherlock Holmes or anybody in between.
Yeah.
You're going to find out the information that you need, and this is going to help you in choosing which path to go down and what you're going to be doing for follow-up. Because I can guarantee you that follow-up is always, it's part of life. Geez, I mean, you follow up on, I don't know, your hair appointment. It's everywhere. It's
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is. And what's so amazing about what you just said too, there's a few different takeaways I had from that. What it's the iceberg analogy, right? It's like, and you're 100% spot on. I could not agree with this more. The first answer people give you 99 times out of 100, if not exponentially greater, is not going to be in depth unless you have that really, really unique, outgoing, bear it all type of person, which is not most people. They tend to be guarded, particularly in, quote unquote, sales oriented conversations. So we never want to accept their first answer as the answer. We have to peel back the onion, get below the surface of the water, and really start asking more questions where we can understand what's really going on. And that's one of my favorite questions is, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. But what's really going on? And the power of tonality should never be underestimated because if we are curious or concerned, that should be demonstrated with the language and the tonality that we are using. And the second part that you said that was so really important is the power of the pause. And so often people are terrified to shut up. It's like, if I'm not talking, if there's a void, it's going to be a problem. And it's like, I don't know what story people make up, but they just get this inherent sense of discomfort when they're pausing. So learning to really dive deep And ask powerful questions from a genuine place of caring and concern is one really important thing that I heard from you. It's leveraging the power of the pause and allowing people a second to step back and go internal and really think about what is going on. And then through that process, you'll be able to more effectively explore and guide the conversation. And what's cool about that too is then I would expect that the ultimate outcome is instead of having to or attempting to put everybody into the same metaphorical box, now you're actually providing real solutions based off of what they want, not what you just think they need.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps you identify, can you truly help them?
Hmm.
You know, or do you need to refer them to somebody else? You know, um, it also answers, do you really want to help them? Sorry,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there are some people that you need to do a no offer, that
Yep.
they are going to be just, it's going to be a nightmare working with them.
Critical lesson. Phew, dude.
So,
Yeah.
walk away gracefully.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes, do you find that ever for you is like more of a gut intuition than a outright like flagrant thing that's been spoken? I mean, I think many times it's fairly flagrant and obvious, like this is not going to be a good match. But in other cases, do you ever just have that gut intuition where you walk away and make the
I
referral?
occasionally I've had a vibe.
Hmm.
And I've learned that if I don't trust the vibe, I regret it.
Yeah, yeah,
So as
every single time.
with age comes wisdom, I don't know, but or been there, done that. So
Yeah.
if I get a vibe and whatever reason, it's just like something's off,
Hmm.
um, and I'll do what I call as a no offer, and I'll
Hmm.
point them to some resources, some other things. Um, there was even a situation once where um I mean, it was literally like, there's just no way. I
Hmm.
could tell the person was all over the place. She would be chasing the shiny object so hard and fast. And you can't get any traction. I can't deliver results, because, because of that. And so I said, I don't, I said, it's been great meeting you. And I have a few things that I'd recommend that you give a try at. And she's going like, well, what is this? Are you doing a takeaway close on me? And I went, what? And I was like, okay, so first of all, I don't do takeaway closes, but if I was, I used a takeaway close sort of as a Hail Mary, as a follow-up at the step 13. I don't do takeaway closes because, that's just not my style and that's not who I am. And I never want to manipulate people. And that also just went, whoa, okay, this is like totally not the type of person I want to be working with. And then she's going like, well, I'll pay you double your rate. And I was like, no, there's not
No,
enough
thank
money
you.
on this planet. But I said it still gracefully. But it almost became combative. And it
Yeah,
was like, I'm not a good fit for you.
yeah,
I
that's
want you to
fascinating.
have the best fit for you to get the most out of this for your business. I'm sorry, but that's just not me.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
trying to take anything away from you.
yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Um, what that makes me curious about is we were chatting a little bit before the recording, and you had mentioned something about it's really important to ensure that you're working with the right people. And where this is leading me to, and I'll bring this full circle, but is we also talked about the synergy, ensuring that there's a consistent through line from marketing to sales to fulfillment, which is all of your people and operations and the actual client experience. I mean, if I'm not to overgeneralize, but to put it in those three big buckets. Um, how often, when you're going in to an organization, do you find that sales is not the only thing that they need help with? A lot of people think that they're like, okay, I need to refine the sales process. I'm not closing enough deals. I'm not, generating enough revenue. But in many cases, I've found that it's can be what's preceding the sale. Yeah, the sales process can use work, but if you're not getting enough leads, it doesn't matter how good your sales process is, you're still not going to be able to compensate for that lack. Hey, so let's talk about that specifically, like with marketing. Or do you run into that as a fairly common challenge where they aren't either the marketing messaging isn't in alignment with the sales or they don't have the right process in place? Do you speak to that at all? Like, tell me how that looks for you.
So, well, marketing and sales are always kissing cousins. They are very distinct disciplines, I should
Mhm.
say. Maybe there's disciples within the areas,
Yep.
but they can be adversarial, which does no one any good.
Mhm.
So the key thing is not the quantity of leads, because I could put a contest out there and offer a free iPad and get hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of leads, and they'd be garbage.
Mhm.
So it's about the quality of the leads. And the quality of the leads is definitely tied to that sales in the sense of, are you attracting the ideal client? Are you answering those questions of what do they want, need, or lack? Why does it matter? What's in it for them? What solution does it provide? What pain does it solve? How does it address what's keeping them up late at night? You know, the niggling worry in the back of their head. So when you get to that, so they can what? And I've got it right here actually. Nobody uses an iPhone. Nobody buys one to make a phone call. Yeah,
Right.
nobody. Okay. So it's all these other reasons. So it's like, what are those primary reasons? Once again, what are those buckets? What are
Mhm.
those speaking points? And identifying those to guide people down the path. Now,
Mhm.
it's the same thing. And there's a science and an art to marketing that is beyond me because I'm not a marketer, I'm a salesperson. But
Mhm.
from a salesperson, boots on the ground, I can definitely sense when something's not working.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when and it can be that, you're not leaning into who that through line is, your ideal client.
Mhm.
From the very beginning, through your client experience, as you pointed out, to becoming a raving fan, giving you additional business, providing you with referrals, providing you with reviews. That's that through line of that client experience. And that's to me that I view that holistically as sales. That's that entire sales experience that you have with the client.
Mhm.
Now, from a marketing perspective for lead gen, it's really, there's a lot of things going on. And, speaking from a sales side, it's definitely, are you speaking to the right audience? Are you going to where they need to be? And once again, depending on the size of your business, what's the right fit for you? Okay. I do a lot of speaking. I'm very comfortable speaking. But somebody else who hates it with a passion, that's not going to be a good path for them. That's
Mhm.
an acquired skill, like learning math. You learn how to do it. But for some people, that's a good pathway. For others, it's a terrible pathway. Some people might lean into doing something like having challenges or something. Well, if that isn't where your audience, they're not hanging out, or your audience isn't on TikTok, then why the heck are you spending any time on TikTok? Okay. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that go into that. But when you get your marketing message and working with a specialist who knows how to take that language and put it into uh, you know things that are really attract your ideal client.
Mhm.
um, and what are the results? Remember, people really pay for the results. I talk a lot about the sales process, but people don't pay for the process, they pay for the results that they're going to get. And
Yep.
so you want to look at what are those results. So if you're looking at somebody who is looking in the health industry. They're looking to have, maybe they don't want to, they're pre-diabetic. Well,
Mhm.
there's one path that they could go down, which would be really bad.
Mhm.
Or there's another path that they could take with maybe some healthy eating habits and some, moderate, easy exercise pathway that can put them on another path, a
Mhm.
path where they can grow old watching their grandchildren
Mhm.
graduate from college, right? So, with a better life. So, what's that language and what does that look like? And then how do you attract people so that they don't feel like, oh, I have to do all this work. All
Yeah.
I can eat
Yeah.
is lettuce for the rest of my life, things like this. Or it's going to be so hard to cook like this. So what do you do to make it easy but give them the results, give them that dream goal that they want.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and once again, I'm not a marketing expert, so
Yeah. Well, no, I think a lot of that you're spot on too. I mean, it is ultimately the result or outcome that they're after. And then coming back to what you said before in just a different context, it is about as making it easy as possible for them, whether it is completing and submitting the review or providing a referral or um, making it as the outcome as attainable as possible, which we start with the end in mind, but then we have to chunk down all those steps because if everybody looks at all the things they have to do, that's when they get fearful and scared and overwhelmed and all the things. But if you're like, here's the first thing we're going to do. And once we master that skill set, once we're able to turn that action into a habit, now we can systematically move on to the next. And again, I'm overgeneralizing, but one thing I wanted to ask you one other question. Have you ever had a circumstance, and this is still in the realm of marketing and the marriage between marketing and sales, which, yeah, as you mentioned, can be very adversarial, which it really should be more complementary. But sometimes, what's the best way to put this? Business transforms, the times transform. What worked 20 years ago is not likely to work as well today. And then those changes are happening at a faster rate than ever before with all of the new technologies that are being produced. If you run into any situations where you've had to come in and have a hard conversation with either the owner or the CMO and just be like, hey, I have a feeling that what you are doing is we can work on this sales process all day long, but it really looks like to me that we're not getting in front of enough of our ideal client. We're getting in front of a lot of clients, just majority, unfortunately, are the wrong one. Have you had to have that conversation, and how did you navigate that with, either or both parties?
yeah. So the best way to work with marketing, of course, is in a very collaborative, transparent way, and then everyone wins, of course.
Hmm.
But so there are times where I see something. I mean, I gave you that example, the auto repair. He was so fixated on price
Hmm.
that and this happens often in sales, especially with the sales teams. They're so focused on like the price. And I'm sorry, but people don't buy on price. Yeah, maybe on Amazon, but even there, people buy the more expensive product. So
Hmm.
at the end of the day, people purchase on the perceived value, you know?
Hmm.
And that's so important that you identify what are those perceived values and why does it matter. And as certain industries, I've been in them, become more commoditized, where you can just purchase something with a click of a button. And, you have to look for what are the other ways that you can serve and provide service and add value that literally you can't put a price on. That means that's so important to the business, that you're taking away a weight, you're taking away a concern, something that they don't even have to think about again. Whereas with something else, they're going to have to be babysitting it, they're going to have to be managing it and monitoring that. And how much time and resources is that? So here's a really good example of this. So when I do work with Costco, and one of the things, hopefully, you're okay telling this, but they would issue purchase orders for every single thing they bought in marketing.
Hmm.
And my point was that was nuts, but in a kind way. It's like, how much does this actual cost? And I did my own analysis and gave it to them that if you're because you're putting this out to get a quote on it, so you're having to manage that, you're having to put the work together, you're having to manage it. Usually it changes, so you have to get a revised quote. Then you finally package it up and give it. Well, how many hours did that take, and how much is that costing you?
Hmm.
Whereas you already know what types of core things. You attached a price list to this, and very specific vendors who do X, Y, and Z add a price list. That order comes up, they get the job. They get it at this price. And I said, now all of a sudden you've saved all this time and money.
Yeah.
And not only that, you can the next step, which they did agree to. First, it was they didn't agree to my $1,000 price, but 400, but eventually got it moved up. The next stage was now let's consolidate the bill. It costs you about $400 to cut a check. At a
Mm-hmm.
big company level, it costs you a lot of money to cut a check. So
Right.
what can you do if you're working with set vendors is to create a consolidated invoice.
Mm-hmm.
So you get one invoice, cut one check, saves a whole
Right.
bunch of time and energy. But as long as you put the right safeguards around it and the parameters around it, I think I'm answering this question that you had, but
Yeah.
there are other things that you can look at in the process. And sometimes people get things so complicated that it's like, why are you doing all these things? And does it matter to the end person? Does it
Mm-hmm.
matter to them?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it adds no value to your customer or your client, then why are you doing all of this?
Or even to your process, it's great. One of my mentors always used to say, it's like complexity is the enemy of execution.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they taught us to do was this simple concept of a value chain. It's like you take any process that's either taking too much time, too many resources, or has too high of a cost, and you really take time to map out each of the individual steps and who each of the independent parties that it's going to affect, and map out what that entire journey looks like. And in many cases, what happens through taking that step back and being able to look at the entire conversation flow from a high level is you go, wow, we have a 30-step process for something that could really only take three. And
Yeah.
every additional link in that chain is an opportunity for a link to get broken
Yep.
and for a contract to slip through the cracks, or a check to not get cut, or so to leave a customer disintegrated and dissatisfied, and whatever context it is. So I love what you said there, because it's so important for us to, when we're running into a problem, the tendency is to focus on the problem instead of going, what is this problem trying to teach me? And really developing the discipline of taking a step back for a moment and looking at everything more holistically and for a high level is really, really powerful. So
Yeah.
that was an incredible insight. Well, Lynn, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for spending your time with us on the Perpetual Growth Podcast. Big shout out to Lynn Whitbeck for bringing so much value to today's conversation. Lynn, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I invite everyone who's interested to download my sales strategy checklist. So this might help you identify some holes in your sales process and in your sales in general. And you can get that at Petite to Queen. Uh, and that's the digit two, petite, digit2queen.com/checklist. And you can connect with me there. I look forward to talking to anyone who has any questions on sales.
That's amazing. And if you are even thinking twice about it, if you're a business owner, sales team manager, director, anybody that has a business that sells a product or service, I would recommend that you take a moment, download that checklist, because in all probability, you have one or a multitude of holes that could potentially be filled. And if this conversation with Lynn resonated with you, it's like we were talking about earlier, you pick the person that speaks to you the most. And when you feel that connection, be sure to reach out to her. Now, if this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe, and leave a review to help us reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. We'll see y'all next time.